Emily Harper had always known life wasn't fair. At just 19 years old, she was already carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her parents had died 2 years ago in a car accident, leaving her responsible for her 12-year-old brother, Danny. They lived in a tiny apartment above a laundromat in a small town no one had ever heard of. Emily worked long hours at a local diner, serving coffee and greasy fries to truck drivers and tourists passing through. The tips were meager, but they kept the lights on and food on the table. Danny was smarter than most kids his age, but he needed stability, something Emily struggled to provide. She often stayed up late, worrying about how she'd pay the rent or afford new shoes when his old ones wore out. Sometimes she dreamed of running away, starting over somewhere far from the noise of the highway and the smell of frying oil. But those dreams never lasted long. There was Danny to think about, and Emily wouldn't leave him behind for anything. One rainy afternoon, as Emily wiped down tables at the diner, a man walked in. He wasn't like the usual customers. For one thing, he wasn't wearing jeans or a flannel shirt. Instead, he wore a tailored suit that looked expensive enough to cover her rent for 6 months. His hair was silver, neatly combed back, and his face carried the lines of someone who'd lived a long, hard life. He sat at a corner booth and ordered black coffee, glancing around the room with sharp eyes. Emily approached cautiously, tray in hand. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked, trying not to stare too obviously at the stranger. He looked up at her, studying her face as if memorizing every detail. "No, thank you," he said in a deep voice. Then, after a pause, he added, "You're Emily Harper, aren't you?" Her stomach dropped. How did he know her name? She forced herself to smile politely. "Yes, that's me." Do I know?" "You?" The man shook his head. "Not yet. But I'd like to talk to you. Privately, if possible." Emily hesitated. This felt wrong, like something out of a bad movie where naive girls ended up kidnapped or worse. Still, there was something trustworthy about the way he spoke, calm and deliberate. Against her better judgment, she nodded. "Okay, let me finish my shift first." An hour later, sitting across from him in the empty booth, Emily listened as the man introduced himself. His name was Richard Bennett, and he was, by all accounts, one of the richest men in America. He owned companies that built rockets, designed artificial intelligence, and created cutting-edge medical technology. None of that mattered much to Emily until he explained why he was there. "I've been watching you," Richard said, folding his hands on the table. "Not in a creepy way, of course. I mean, I've had people look into your situation, your family, your finances, your struggles. I believe you could use some help." Emily frowned. "What kind of help?" Richard leaned forward slightly, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. "I want you to marry me." For a moment, Emily thought she'd misheard him. Marry him? A complete stranger? And not just any stranger, a 73-year-old billionaire who could easily be her grandfather. She laughed nervously. "I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett, but I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. I don't even know you." "That's true," Richard admitted, "but this isn't about romance. It's business. In exchange for marrying me, I'll give you $5 million. Enough to take care of yourself and your brother for the rest of your lives." Emily's breath caught in her throat. $5 million? That was more money than she'd ever imagined having. With that kind of cash, she could send Danny to the best schools, buy them a real home, maybe even start a business of her own. But marrying someone she didn't know? Someone decades older than her? It sounded insane. "What's the catch?" she asked suspiciously. "No catch," Richard replied smoothly. "Well, not exactly. We'll need to keep up appearances. Attend events with me. Act like a loving wife in public. But privately, we'll have separate lives, separate bedrooms. No physical relationship. You'll retain your independence, except for a few obligations. Emily stared at him, trying to process everything he was saying. Was this some kind of joke? A scam? Or was he serious? Why would you do this? She finally asked. Why? Me? Richard smiled faintly. Because I need someone young, intelligent, and unattached. Someone who won't ask too many questions at least, not right away. And because... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Because I believe. You're exactly what I've been looking for. Despite her doubts, Emily couldn't ignore the opportunity. If Richard was telling the truth, and assuming he wasn't secretly planning to lock her in a dungeon, this could change everything. For Danny's sake, she decided to hear him out. Over the next few days, Richard laid out the details of their arrangement. The marriage would last 1 year. During that time, Emily would live in his estate in California, a sprawling mansion surrounded by lush gardens and state-of-the-art security systems. After the year was up, she'd receive the promised money, tax-free, with no strings attached. If she wanted to stay longer, they could renegotiate. If not, she could walk away with her fortune. It all sounded too good to be true. Yet, as Emily signed the legal documents prepared by Richard's team of lawyers, she reminded herself that nothing in life came without risk. She trusted her instincts. They'd kept her alive so far, and they told her Richard wasn't lying. Not completely, anyway. Emily stood outside the massive iron gates of Richard Bennett's estate, her suitcase in one hand, and Danny waving goodbye from the car as it drove away. She felt like she'd stepped into another world. The mansion loomed ahead of her, its white walls gleaming under the California sun. Lush green lawns stretched out on either side, dotted with flower beds that looked like they belonged in a magazine. A fountain bubbled cheerfully near the entrance, and the air smelled faintly of roses. A man approached her, smiling warmly. He was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair, streaked with gray. "You must be Emily," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Lucas. I work here, driver, handyman, whatever needs doing." "Nice to meet you," Emily replied, shaking his hand. Something about Lucas put her at ease. Maybe it was the easy way he smiled, or the fact that he didn't seem intimidated by the opulence around them. Lucas grabbed her suitcase and led her inside. The interior of the house was even more impressive than the outside. High ceilings, marble, floors, and crystal chandeliers greeted her at every turn. Paintings hung on the walls, each one worth more than Emily's entire apartment back home. She tried not to gawk too obviously, but couldn't help feeling overwhelmed. "This is the living room," Lucas explained, gesturing to a spacious area filled with plush couches and glass tables. "And over there's the dining room. Kitchens. Through that door if you get hungry. Mr. Bennett will give you a proper tour later." Emily nodded, still taking everything in. As Lucas showed her to her room, she noticed something odd. Cameras. Small, discreet ones tucked into corners and along the ceiling. At first glance, they blended seamlessly with the decor, but once she spotted one, she began noticing others everywhere. Her bedroom was beautiful, a king-sized bed, soft carpeting, and a balcony overlooking the garden. But when she opened the closet, she found it stocked with clothes that weren't hers. Dresses, blazers, jeans, shoes all brand new and perfectly fitted to her size. It was thoughtful, sure, but also unsettling. How did Richard know what would fit her? That evening, Richard joined her for dinner. They ate in silence for a while before he finally spoke. "How are you settling in?" "It's nice," Emily said carefully. "Big," Richard chuckled. "It takes some getting used to. If you need anything, just let Lucas know. He'll take care of it." "Thanks." Emily hesitated, then decided to ask the question nagging at her. Why all the cameras? Is someone watching us? Richard's expression didn't change, but his tone grew colder. Security measures. This place holds valuable things, not just money, but secrets. I can't afford to take risks. Secrets? Emily wanted to press further, but something in his voice told her not to push too hard. Instead, she changed the subject. So, what exactly am I supposed to do here? Besides act like your wife, I mean. For now, nothing, Richard said. Explore the grounds, get comfortable. Tomorrow, we'll talk about your role in public. Appearances. After that, he trailed off, shrugging slightly. We'll see. The next morning, Emily woke up early and decided to explore the mansion on her own. She wandered down hallways lined with artwork and polished wood, marveling at how quiet everything was. Even the staff seemed to move silently, appearing only when needed. Eventually, she found herself in front of a set of double doors marked Private. Curiosity got the better of her, and she pushed them open. Inside was an office unlike any she'd ever seen. The walls were covered in screens displaying maps, graphs, and streams of data. In the center of the room stood a large desk cluttered with papers and devices she didn't recognize. One screen caught her eye. It showed live footage of various parts of the estate, including the very hallway she'd been standing in moments ago. As she stared at the monitors, a strange sensation washed over her. Something wasn't right. Why would Richard need such advanced surveillance? And why did some of the screens show symbols and codes she couldn't understand? Before she could investigate further, a voice startled her. Miss Harper, this area is restricted. She spun around to see Lucas standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. I'm sorry, she stammered. I didn't realize. I was just looking around. Lucas nodded slowly. Best not to wander too far. Mr. Bennet values his privacy. Emily backed out of the room, her heart pounding. What had she stumbled upon? And why did Lucas look so uneasy? Over the next few days, Emily tried to focus on adjusting to her new life. She spent time reading in the library, walking through the gardens, and practicing polite conversation with Richard during meals. But the memory of that office lingered in her mind. Every time she passed those private doors, she wondered what else might be hidden behind them. One afternoon, while exploring a quieter part of the house, she discovered a staircase leading downward. The steps were narrow and unmarked, almost as if they weren't meant to be found. Against her better judgment, she descended at the bottom. She found herself in what appeared to be a laboratory. Machines hummed softly, their lights casting eerie shadows on the walls. Glass tanks containing strange liquids sat on counters, and wires snaked across the floor like veins. In the center of the room was a large metal cylinder, sealed tightly and surrounded by sensors. What is this place? Emily whispered to herself. That's none of your concern. She jumped, spinning around to see Richard standing at the foot of the stairs. His face was unreadable, but his voice carried an edge she hadn't heard before. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I didn't mean to. You need to stay out of areas you don't belong in, Richard interrupted. This isn't a game, Emily. Some things here aren't safe. His words sent a chill down her spine. Safe? What did he mean by that? Before she could ask, he turned and walked back up the stairs, leaving her alone in the dimly lit lab. Later that night, unable to sleep, Emily crept downstairs again. This time, she headed for Richard's study, hoping to find answers. The door was unlocked, and she slipped inside, closing it softly behind her. On the desk, she found a folder labeled Project Nova. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were documents detailing experiments involving alien technology. Photos of strange artifacts, diagrams of energy fields, and notes scribbled in Richard's handwriting filled the pages. One phrase stood out: time anomaly detected. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Emily froze, clutching the folder to her chest. She barely had time to shove it back onto the desk before the door creaked open out. It was Lucas. You? Shouldn't be here, he said quietly. I couldn't sleep, Emily stammered. I thought maybe a book. Lucas sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, I know this place is overwhelming, but trust me, you don't want to dig too deep. Not yet. Why? Emily demanded. What's going on? Those files there? About aliens, aren't they? Lucas hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, sort of. But it's not just about aliens. It's about survival. About protecting humanity from something bigger than we can imagine. Emily stared at him, her mind racing. Survival? Humanity? None of it made sense. Why does Richard have all this? What does he know? Lucas glanced toward the door, lowering his voice. He didn't always look like this, you know. 20 years ago, he disappeared during a space mission. Everyone thought he was dead. When he came back, well, let's just say he brought something with him. Something that changed everything. Before Emily could respond, Lucas ushered her out of the study. Get some rest, he advised. Tomorrow's another day. Back in her room, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Everything she'd seen and heard swirled in her mind like a storm. Alien technology. Time anomalies. Secrets buried beneath layers of wealth and power. Whatever Richard was hiding, it went far beyond anything she'd imagined when she agreed to marry him. But one thing was clear. She wouldn't be able to walk away, not until she uncovered the truth. The next morning, Emily woke up feeling like she hadn't slept at all. Her mind was racing with questions about Richard, the lab, and the files she'd seen the night before. She couldn't shake the image of those strange diagrams and alien symbols from her thoughts. What did it all mean? And why had Richard brought her here? At breakfast, Richard acted as if nothing unusual had happened. He sat at the head of the table, reading the newspaper and sipping coffee. When Emily joined him, he glanced up briefly, but didn't say much. Sleep well? He asked casually. Not really, Emily admitted. She hesitated, then decided to confront him. Richard, I need to know what's going on. Last night, I saw the lab and the files. What is Project Nova? Richard lowered his newspaper slowly, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he folded the paper and set it aside. You weren't supposed to see any of that. I know, Emily said quickly, but I did. And now I want answers. Richard sighed, rubbing his temples. This isn't something I can explain easily. It's complicated, dangerous. Try me, Emily insisted. I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth. Richard studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Fine, but you won't like it. He began explaining, his voice calm but serious. 20 years ago, Richard had been part of a top-secret space mission. The goal was to explore a distant asteroid belt believed to contain rare minerals. But during the mission, something went wrong. His ship encountered an anomaly, a field of energy, unlike anything scientists had ever seen. When the ship passed, through it, time seemed to warp. Hours turned into days, and when Richard finally returned to Earth, 2 decades had passed. But you didn't age, Emily interrupted. How is that even possible? That's the thing, Richard said. The anomaly affected me, changed me. It slowed my aging process dramatically. But that's not all. I also brought something back with me. What? Emily asked, her heart pounding. Richard leaned closer, lowering his voice. An artifact. A piece of alien technology. We don't fully understand how it works, but it seems to have properties related to time and space. That's why I built this estate to study it safely, to keep it hidden from people who would misuse its power. Emily stared at him, trying to process everything he was saying. Aliens, time anomalies, hidden artifacts. It sounded like science fiction, but Richard's tone made it clear he wasn't joking. And Lucas knows about this too? Yes, Richard confirmed. He's been with me since the beginning. He helps protect the facility and me, so why bring me into this? Emily asked, why marry me? What do I have to do with any of this? Richard hesitated, then said, because of who you are. Who I am. Emily repeated, confused. I'm just a girl from a small town. I don't know anything about aliens or whatever this is. You're more important than you realize, Richard said cryptically. That's all I can tell you for now. Frustrated, Emily pushed her chair back and stood up. This is insane. I didn't sign up for this. No one signs up for this kind of thing, Richard replied sharply. But sometimes we don't get a choice. For the rest of the day, Emily avoided Richard and stayed in her room, thinking about what he'd told her. She felt trapped, unsure whether to trust him or run away. But deep down, she knew running wouldn't solve anything. If Richard was telling the truth, even part of it, then whatever he was hiding could affect more than just her. It could change the world. Later that evening, Lucas knocked on her door. Can we talk? He asked quietly. Emily opened the door and let him in. He looked nervous, pacing back and forth before finally sitting down. I owe you an explanation, he said. About Richard, about everything. Then explain. Emily said firmly. Lucas took a deep breath. When Richard came back from space, he wasn't the same person. Physically, yes, he looked younger, healthier. But mentally, he was different. He started talking about things no one else understood. Theories about time travel, alternate realities, advanced civilizations. At first, everyone thought he'd lost his mind. But then he showed us proof. Proof? Emily echoed. The artifact, Lucas clarified. It's real. And it does things we can't explain. Sometimes, when it activates, it shows glimpses of the future. Visions of events that haven't happened yet. Emily's eyes widened. Like what? Lucas hesitated. Wars, disasters, things that could destroy humanity if we're not prepared. But there's one vision Richard keeps seeing over and over. Again you. Me? Emily whispered. Stunned. Double quotes yes, Lucas said. In the future, you're leading some kind of resistance. Fighting against something. We don't know what exactly. All we know is that you're crucial to humanity's survival. Emily shook her head, overwhelmed. That's impossible. I'm nobody. I can't fight wars or save the world. You don't have to believe me, Lucas said gently. But Richard thinks you're special. That's why he married you. To protect you. To prepare you. For what? Emily demanded. For whatever's coming, Lucas replied grimly. And it's coming soon. Over the next few days, Emily tried to absorb everything she'd learned. She spent hours in the library, reading books about physics, astronomy, and history. She asked Richard endless questions, though he rarely gave straight answers. Slowly, pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. One afternoon, Richard invited her to the lab. It's time you saw the artifact, he said. Emily followed him. Downstairs, her stomach churning with anticipation. In the center of the room stood the metal cylinder she'd seen earlier. Richard entered a code on a keypad, and the cylinder opened with a hiss. Inside was a glowing orb, pulsing softly with light. It looked otherworldly, almost alive. This is it, Richard said. The key to everything. As Emily stepped closer, the orb suddenly flared brighter. She gasped, stumbling backward. Images flooded her mind, visions of cities burning, skies filled with strange ships, and herself standing amidst chaos, giving orders to others. Then, just as quickly, the images faded, leaving her breathless. What was that? She asked, clutching her chest. A glimpse of the future, Richard explained. Your future. Emily sank into a nearby chair, trembling. This isn't real. It can't be. It is, Richard said firmly. And it's why you're here, why you must stay. For the first time since arriving at the estate, Emily felt a glimmer of purpose. Maybe she wasn't just a poor girl trying to survive. Maybe she was meant for something greater, something unimaginable. But as she looked at the glowing orb, she couldn't help wondering, was she ready for what lay ahead? The days that followed were a blur for Emily. After seeing the artifact and experiencing the vision firsthand, she couldn't stop thinking about what Richard had said. Was she really destined to lead humanity against some unknown threat? And if so, how could she possibly prepare for something like that? Richard began involving her more in his work. He showed her the lab equipment, explained how the artifact functioned, or at least what little they understood, and introduced her to the team of scientists secretly working on Project Nova. There were physicists, engineers, biologists, all experts in their fields, handpicked by Richard to study the alien technology. At first, Emily felt completely out of her depth. She didn't understand most of the technical jargon, and the scientists barely acknowledged her presence. But Richard insisted she attend meetings and observe their experiments. You need to learn, he told her. Time is running out. One evening, after another long day in the lab, Emily found Lucas waiting for her outside the mansion. He leaned against a tree, smoking a cigarette and staring at the stars. When he saw her, he smiled faintly. How's it going? Not great, Emily admitted, sitting down beside him. I don't belong here. I'm not smart enough or brave enough or whatever enough to do. Whatever it is, you all think I'm supposed to do. Lucas exhaled a cloud of smoke and shrugged. None of us are ready for stuff like this. Not really. But sometimes, life throws you into situations where you have no choice but to figure it out. Emily sighed. It's just hard. Everyone seems to know more than me, including you. I don't, Lucas said honestly. I'm just better at pretending I do. He paused, then added, Look, Emily, I get why you're scared. Hell, I'd be terrified too if someone told me I was supposed to save the world. But the thing is, you've already proven you're stronger than you think. What do you mean? Emily asked. You left everything behind to take care of. Your brother, Lucas reminded her. You worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over his head. You married a stranger because you thought it might give you both a better future. That takes guts, kid. More guts than most people have. Emily looked down at her hands, unsure how to respond. She hadn't thought about her past decisions in those terms. To her, they'd always been acts of survival, not courage. Before she could say anything, a loud alarm blared through the estate. Red lights flashed across the grounds, and voices shouted in the distance. Emily jumped to her feet. What's happening? Lucas grabbed her arm. Come on, we need to get inside. They ran back toward the mansion, where Richard stood near. The entrance, barking orders to the staff. Lock down the perimeter. Activate the shields. What's going on? Emily demanded as she reached him. Intruders, Richard snapped. Someone knows we're here, and they're trying to break in. Emily's heart raced. Who would? No time to explain? Richard interrupted. Get to the safe room. Lucas pulled her toward a hidden door beneath the staircase. Inside was a reinforced chamber stocked with supplies and communication equipment. Once they were secured, Richard joined them, sealing the door behind him. Through surveillance monitors, they watched as drones circled the property, firing lasers. At the invisible force field protecting the mansion, the shield shimmered under the assault, holding steady for now. Armed men dressed in black tactical gear moved methodically across the grounds. searching for weaknesses. They must have traced the energy readings, Richard muttered. Damn. Who are these people? Emily asked, her voice trembling. Rivals, Richard replied grimly. Corporations, governments, rogue factions, they all want the artifact. They'll stop at nothing to get it. As the attack continued, Emily noticed something strange. The artifact in the lab, the glowing orb, had started pulsing faster. Its light grew brighter, almost frantic. Then, without warning, the entire mansion shook violently. The artifact's destabilizing. One of the scientists shouted over the intercom. We need to shut it down. No, Richard yelled back. If we turn it off now, we risk losing everything we've learned. But if it explodes, we lose even more. The scientist countered. Emily turned to Richard, panic rising in her chest. What happens if it blows up? It could tear a hole in space-time, Richard admitted, destroying everything within miles. Emily stared at him, horrified. Then we have to stop it. Before anyone could stop her, she bolted out of the safe room and headed straight for the lab. The mansion was chaos, alarms wailing, debris falling from the ceiling, but she didn't care. She had to reach the artifact. When she arrived, the orb was floating in midair, spinning wildly. Energy crackled around it, sending sparks flying. Scientists scrambled to contain it, but nothing seemed to work. As Emily approached, the orb suddenly locked onto her, its glow intensifying. Emily, stay back, Richard shouted, rushing in. Behind her, but it was too late. The orb shot a beam of light directly at her, enveloping her in warmth. For a moment, she felt weightless, untethered from reality. Visions flooded her mind again, this time clearer, sharper. She saw armies clashing, cities crumbling, and herself leading a desperate fight against an enemy she couldn't fully comprehend. At the center of it all was the artifact, pulsing like a heartbeat. And then, silence. The orb settled back into its containment unit, its light dimming. The shaking stopped, and the alarms fell silent. Slowly, the mansion returned to normal, or as close to normal as it ever got. Richard and the others entered cautiously, staring at the artifact in awe. What just happened? One of the scientists whispered. Emily turned to face them, her expression resolute. I think it chose me. Chosen, that was the only word Emily could use to describe how she felt in the days following the attack. The artifact had reacted to her in a way no one could explain. Even Richard seemed shaken by what he'd witnessed. It's never done anything like that before, he admitted during a private conversation. Not with anyone else. Why? Me? Emily asked. Why now? Richard hesitated, then said, Maybe it's because you're uncorrupted, untainted by greed or ambition. Or maybe, he trailed off, lost in thought. Or maybe what? Emily pressed. Maybe it sees something in you that we can't, Richard finished softly. Something essential. Whatever the reason, Emily knew her role had changed. She wasn't just Richard's wife anymore. She was part of something much bigger. Something that terrified her, but also gave her purpose. Over the next week, she threw herself into learning everything she could about the artifact and its potential. Richard taught her how to operate the lab equipment, while Lucas trained her in self-defense and combat tactics. The scientists shared their research, explaining theories about wormholes, parallel universes, and the fabric of reality itself. It was overwhelming. But Emily refused to give up. Every night, she studied until her eyes burned, determined to rise to the challenge ahead. And slowly, she began to notice changes in herself, not just mentally, but physically. Her reflexes sharpened. Her instincts became sharper. It was as though the artifact had awakened something dormant within her. One evening, as she practiced sparring with Lucas in the gym, he paused and wiped sweat from his brow. You're getting good, he said approvingly. Better than I expected. Thanks, Emily replied, catching her breath. But I still don't feel ready. No one does, Lucas said simply. Not when the stakes are this high. Just then, Richard appeared in the doorway. His face was pale, his usual composure replaced by unease. We have a problem, he announced. Emily frowned. What kind of problem? There's been another breach, Richard explained. This time, they're not after the artifact. They're after you. Emily felt her stomach drop. Me? Why? Because of what happened last week, Richard said grimly. Whoever attacked us knows the artifact responded to you. They think you hold the key to unlocking its secrets. And do I? Emily asked quietly. Richard hesitated, then nodded. Yes, whether you realize it or not, you do. For the first time since arriving at the estate, Emily felt truly afraid not for herself, but for everyone else. If these people came after her, they wouldn't hesitate to hurt anyone who got in their way, including Danny. We need to move, Richard said decisively. Somewhere safer. Somewhere they won't find us. Where? Emily asked. Richard's gaze hardened. There's only one place left. Underground. As plans were made to relocate the operation, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that her life was spiraling out of control. Yet, amidst the fear and uncertainty, she clung to one truth. She wasn't alone. Richard believed in her. Lucas believed in her. And somewhere deep inside, she was starting to believe in herself. But the question remained, would belief be enough to save them all? The underground bunker was unlike anything Emily had ever seen. Hidden beneath miles of desert rock, it was a maze of tunnels and chambers, filled with advanced technology. There were labs, living quarters, training facilities, and even a command center equipped with screens, displaying real-time data from satellites orbiting Earth. It felt like stepping into the future, or maybe another world entirely. Richard explained that the bunker had been built years ago as a contingency plan. When I first brought the artifact back, he said, I knew it would attract attention. This place was designed to protect it and us if things ever got bad. Emily nodded, though her mind was still reeling from everything she'd learned. She tried to focus on the present, but her thoughts kept drifting to Danny. Was he safe? Would these attackers come after him too? The uncertainty gnawed at her, making it hard to concentrate. Over the next few days, life in the bunker settled into a routine. Emily spent hours studying the artifact, trying to understand its connection to her. Scientists conducted experiments around the clock, analyzing its energy patterns and attempting to replicate its effects. Meanwhile, Lucas continued training Emily in combat and strategy, pushing her harder than ever before. You're doing great, Lucas said one afternoon as they sparred in the gym. But you need to trust yourself more. Stop second-guessing every move. I'm not exactly a natural at this, Emily shot back, dodging his punch. No one is, Lucas replied. Not even Richard. But you've got instincts. Use them. As Emily worked to improve her skills, Richard began preparing her for leadership. He taught her how to make decisions under pressure, how to delegate tasks, and how to inspire others. At first, Emily struggled. She didn't see herself as a leader, but Richard insisted. People will look to you when the time comes, he said firmly. You need to be ready. Despite her growing confidence, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Every night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the visions she'd seen in her mind. Cities burning, skies filled with strange ships, herself standing amidst chaos, giving orders to unseen allies. What did it all mean? And why had the artifact chosen her? One evening, as she wandered through the bunker's corridors, she stumbled upon a room she hadn't noticed before. Inside, holographic displays floated in midair, showing maps of Earth overlaid with glowing symbols. In the center of the room stood Richard, staring intently at one of the projections. What is this place? Emily asked, stepping inside. The war room, Richard replied without looking up. This is where we track potential threats, where we plan our next moves. Emily approached cautiously, studying the maps. Are those alien ships? Yes, Richard confirmed. Or at least, that's what we think they are. They've been moving closer to Earth for months now. We don't know their intentions yet, but what? But I suspect they'll arrive sooner than we expect. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. And when they do? That's where you come in, Richard said, finally turning to face her. According to the artifact's visions, you're the key to stopping them. Emily shook her head, overwhelmed. I don't know how to stop an alien invasion, Richard. I barely know how to survive my own life. You'll figure it out, Richard said firmly. Because you have to. Before Emily could respond, alarms blared throughout the bunker. Red lights flashed, and voices echoed over the intercom. Intruder alert. All personnel to defensive positions. Richard grabbed Emily's arm and pulled her toward the command center. When they arrived, chaos greeted them. Screens displayed images of armed men infiltrating the surface above the bunker. Explosions rocked the ground, sending tremors through the tunnels below. How did they find us? Emily demanded, panic rising in her chest. They must have tracked. Our energy signature, Richard muttered. Damn it. Lucas burst into the room, holding a rifle. We need to evacuate, now. No, Richard snapped. If we leave, they'll follow us. We have to hold them off here. And if they breach the bunker? Lucas countered. They won't, Richard said grimly. Not if we use the artifact. Emily's eyes widened. What do you mean? Activate it, Richard ordered, turning to the scientists gathered nearby. Full power. Let's see what it can really do. The lead scientist hesitated. Sir, activating the artifact at full capacity could destabilize it. We might not survive the backlash. We don't have a choice, Richard growled. Do. As the scientists scrambled to comply, Emily turned to Richard. What happens if it destabilizes? It destroys everything within range, including us, Richard admitted. But it's better than letting them take it. Emily stared at him, horrified. There has to be another way. There isn't, Richard said softly. Sometimes sacrifice is necessary. Before Emily could argue further, the bunker shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling, and shouts echoed through the tunnels. The attackers were getting closer. Emily, get to the artifact, Richard ordered. It responds to you. Maybe you can stabilize it. Without waiting for her response, he handed her a small device, a remote control of sorts, and pushed her toward the lab. Lucas followed close behind, covering her with his rifle. When they reached the lab, the artifact was already pulsing erratically, its light flickering like a dying star. Emily stepped forward, gripping the remote tightly. What am I supposed to do? She whispered. Focus, Lucas urged. Let it guide you. Closing her eyes, Emily took a deep breath and extended her hand toward the orb. Instantly, warmth flooded her body, and she felt a strange connection to the artifact, as if it were alive, communicating with her. Images flashed in her mind, coordinates, calculations, strategies. She understood suddenly what needed to be. Done with trembling fingers, she entered commands into the remote, syncing it with the artifact. Slowly, the orb's light stabilized, growing brighter and steadier. The shaking stopped, and the alarms fell silent. What did you do? Lucas asked, lowering his weapon. I don't know, Emily admitted, but it worked. Moments later, Richard entered the lab, his face pale but relieved. They're retreating, he announced. Whatever you did, it scared them off. Emily turned to him, her expression resolute. They'll be back. I know, Richard said quietly, which is why we need to prepare. For the rest of the night, the team worked tirelessly to reinforce the bunker's defenses and analyze the artifact's new behavior. Emily stayed by its side, unwilling to leave. She felt drawn to it now, as if it were a part of her. A piece of something greater. Got as dawn broke, Emily stood alone in the lab, staring at the artifact. For the first time, she didn't feel afraid. Instead, she felt determined. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she couldn't face them alone, but she also knew she wasn't alone anymore. She glanced at Richard and Lucas, who were discussing plans in the corner. Then she looked at the artifact, its steady glow filling the room with soft light. Deep down, she realized something important. She wasn't just fighting for herself or for humanity. She was fighting for a future worth believing in, and for the first time, she believed she could win. Weeks passed after the attack on the bunker, and life settled into a tense routine. The artifact remained stable, its energy contained, but still mysterious. Emily spent her days training, studying, and working with Richard and the team to prepare for whatever might come next. She wasn't just learning how to fight, she was learning how to lead. Slowly, she began to feel like she belonged to the mission, to the team, to something larger than herself. But the calm didn't last long. One morning, as Emily reviewed tactical maps in the war room, Richard entered looking grim. "We've detected unusual activity near Jupiter," he said, pointing to a screen displaying satellite data. "Something big is heading our way." "Aliens?" Emily asked, her stomach tightening. "Almost certainly," Richard replied. "They're moving faster than before. If they maintain their speed, they'll reach Earth within weeks." Emily swallowed hard. "Are we ready?" Richard hesitated, then shook his head. "Not fully, but we don't have time to wait." Over. The next few days, the bunker buzzed with frantic activity. Scientists worked around the clock to enhance the artifact's defenses, while engineers fortified the surface installations above ground. Lucas trained Emily harder than ever, teaching her advanced combat techniques and survival skills. "You need to be prepared for anything," he told her. "Out there, it won't just be about winning fights, it'll be about staying alive." Despite the chaos, Emily found moments of quiet reflection. Late at night, when everyone else had gone to bed, she would sit by the artifact and think about what lay ahead. She thought about Danny, safe back home, and wondered if she'd ever see him again. She thought about Richard, who had gambled everything on her, and whether she could live up to his faith. Most of all, she thought about herself, the girl from nowhere who now carried the weight of humanity's future on her shoulders. One evening, as she sat alone in the lab, Lucas joined her. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her silently for a moment. "You okay?" he finally asked. "I don't know," Emily admitted. "I keep thinking about how much is riding on me. What if I fail?" "You won't," Lucas said simply. "You've got something most people don't." "What's that?" "Purpose," Lucas replied. "You're not doing this because you have to. You're doing it because you believe in it. That makes all the difference." Emily nodded slowly, letting his words sink in. Maybe he was right. Maybe belief really was enough. The day came sooner than anyone expected. Early one morning, alarms blared through the bunker, louder than ever. Before, on the monitors, dozens of alien ships appeared in Earth's orbit, their sleek designs unlike anything humans had ever seen. Communication attempts failed, and within hours, the invaders launched an assault. Cities burned as beams of energy rained down from the sky. Governments scrambled to respond, but their weapons were useless against the aliens' advanced technology. Chaos spread across the globe, and panic set in among survivors. In the bunker, Emily stood with Richard and Lucas, staring at the screens, showing destruction unfolding above ground. "It's time," Richard said quietly. "We have to act." Emily nodded, gripping the remote control linked to the artifact. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "Tell me what to do." Richard placed a hand on her shoulder. "Trust yourself. Trust the artifact. It knows what needs to happen." With Lucas by her side, Emily led a small team to the surface. Above ground, the air was thick with smoke and ash. Alien drones patrolled the skies, firing indiscriminately at anything that moved. The team fought their way to a clearing where Richard had instructed them to activate the artifact dot as they set up the equipment. Emily felt the artifact pulse in response to her presence. Its light grew brighter, almost blinding. She closed her eyes, focusing on the connection she'd felt before. Images flooded her mind, coordinates, patterns, calculations. She understood suddenly what needed to be done. Using the remote, she synchronized the artifact with the alien ship's energy signatures. Then, with a deep breath, she activated it. A beam of light shot into the sky, connecting with the lead alien ship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ship exploded in. A burst of energy, sending shockwaves rippling outward. One by one, the other ships followed suit, collapsing like dominoes until none remained. When the light faded, silence fell over the battlefield. Emily sank to her knees, exhausted but alive. Around her, the team cheered, hugging each other in relief. Lucas helped her to her feet, grinning. "You did it," he said. "You saved us." Emily shook her head. "We did it. All of us." Back in the bunker, Richard greeted them with tears in his eyes. "You've changed the course of history," he said, embracing Emily. "Humanity owes you everything." But Emily didn't feel like a hero. She felt like someone who had been given a chance to protect the people she loved, to prove herself, and to make a difference. And she knew her journey wasn't over yet. In the weeks that followed, the world began to rebuild. Governments reached out to Richard and his team, eager to learn more about the artifact and its role in defeating the invaders. Emily became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even ordinary people could rise to extraordinary challenges. Yet, despite the recognition, Emily stayed humble. She continued working with Richard and the scientists, determined to uncover the artifact's remaining secrets. She also made plans to visit Danny, promising him a better future one, where he wouldn't have to worry about money or safety. Standing on the balcony of the bunker one evening, Emily looked out at the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Behind her, Lucas joined her, leaning on the railing. "What happens now?" he asked. "We move forward," Emily replied. "Together." Lucas smiled. "Sounds good to me." As she gazed at the stars, Emily felt a sense of peace. She didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but she knew she wasn't alone. With the artifact's power, her newfound strength, and the support of those around her, she was ready to face whatever came next, because sometimes heroes aren't born, they're made. And Emily Harper was proof of that. This concludes the story. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments or additional details.